Hello, everybody. Welcome to the European Marine Board's third Thursday Science webinar series. My name is Sheila Heymans. I'm the Executive Director of the European Marine Board, and I will be your moderator today. I believe you guys can see the housekeeping slides. So just to say, for housekeeping rules, please make sure that your name is clearly entered so that when you ask a question, we know who you are. You can use the Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your slides, at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. And if you do so, please also say where you're from and what organization and country so that we know who we're speaking to. And I will, at the end of the presentations, use those Q&A to moderate the discussion. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat function. And please be aware that the webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. So today, our webinar will be on the waves of resonance, psychological impact on the psychological impact of marine sounds. This is linked to our Artists in Residence, Embracing the Ocean Artists in Residence program, where Elise, Guillaume was our Artist in Residence last year. And Marine Severin is a clinical psychologist who was a doctoral student here at Elise, working with her. And Clea Parcerisas is a postdoctoral researcher at Elise who also worked with Elise on this project. So I think without further ado, Elise is there, and I will stop sharing my screen and you can share, Elise, and then you guys can take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila, and hello, everyone. Okay, so sharing.
Here we go. I think we can see it okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so hello, everyone. Welcome. So my name's Elise. I'll just start off by introducing aspects of the project, and then I'll hand over to my collaborators, Clea and Marine. So Waves of Resonance is a 16-minute surround soundscape incorporating marine sounds from the North Sea and the Arctic, recorded from both above and below water. It includes anthropogenic sounds, so human-induced sounds such as boats or pile driving sounds, as well as biological sounds like the sound of whales or fish, and also geophonic sounds like the sounds of waves and melting sea ice. So the sound montage of the work was influenced by research on the psychological impact of listening to marine sounds, which is a study that we co-led together with Marine through research workshops. So perhaps I'm just going to start talking a bit about how the project started. So for several years now in my practice, I've been exploring the relationships between psychological states and environmental change. So just to give you an example, in a previous film I made called Eventual Horizon, I expressed the parallel between the experience of grief for a loved one and ecological degradation in the Arctic. So the film soundscape was made from Arctic field recordings. And when this film was shown, I noticed that there was an emotional engagement from the audience with a particular interest in the sound. So this enacted a curiosity to gain a better understanding of human sensitivity in the regards to the ocean, but also more specifically, the emotional responses people could have when listening to particular marine sounds, and whether this could also enact pro-environmental behavior afterwards. So just to illustrate this image, so in this image here, I'm recording the sound of melting glaciers. So the sound kind of resembles a cracking sound, which is produced by the melting ice when ancient air bubbles dissolve into the atmosphere. So for me, this listening experience is also to bear witness to climate change, to the Earth's deep time memories evaporating into the atmosphere as well. So some of these geophonic sounds are also included in Waves of Resonance. So along with the sound of melting glaciers, the soundscape also includes sounds of melting sea ice, which is sometimes similar to the sound of whispers, perhaps. So this sound is basically created when these big pieces of ice slip and slide on top of each other. So this is also an example of faster landscape image of the sea ice melting. So the waves of resonance soundscape also includes additional recordings from the Arctic, which were given by Professor Michel André, who is also another of our scientific collaborators for sound recordings. So Michel André provided sounds of sperm whales and dolphins. Something which I've always found fascinating with these recordings is that they really convey a sense of proximity with the whales and dolphins. They seem very, very close. However, they are actually recorded a few hundred meters away from the hydrophones. So the sound recordings of waves of resonance were made using a variety of microphones, including hydrophones and geophones. So this enables us to record sounds that are usually inaudible to the human ear. So here on the left, I'm recording with a geophone in the Arctic to document the vibrations emitted by the ice. In this instance, you could hear the movement of water below the ice as well. And on the right image, I'm recording using several microphones at once. So a contact microphone, a geophone, and a hydrophone to reveal multiple acoustic dimensions simultaneously. So on the right image, this is recorded in the North Sea, in a Belgian nature reserve, in very shallow waters. Yeah. So moving on. Oh yeah, also what I wanted to add, a point about the importance for me as an artist as well to do field sound recording. These are quite intimate moments of listening, which offer, yeah, more intimate perspectives into bodies of water as well. So moving on to the next slide. So in parallel to these moments that are often led in solitude, and thanks to Clea and the Bliss acoustic team, I had the unique opportunity to accompany them aboard the Simon Stevens vessel to gain a better understanding of the scientific acoustic recordings, but also the impact of noise pollution in the North Sea. So many sounds that are included in the sound piece were recorded by Clea and the acoustic team at Bliss. So now I'll pass on to Clea, who'll tell us more about her research on acoustics.
Thank you, Elise. So basically what we do, we don't focus so much on recording a specific moment like Elise does, but we try to record long-term in the way that we can actually record for several months at once. But to do that, you need a lot of equipment, and you can see it here in the slides where we actually put a hydrophone on a specific frame. You can see an example here on the top slide that we actually deploy with the Simon Stevens, the research vessel, and that stays in the sea bottom for 4 or 5 months. And after 4 or 5 months, we come back and we can retrieve it. And then we can actually access those data. Of course, it's not, we don't always know what happened during these months. So actually the work that we do is trying to analyze those data to try to understand which information we can obtain from the acoustics. One of the information that we're interested in is, of course, the noise pollution. And that's very important here in Belgium because it's a very exploited area. So there are lots of human activities going on. And we want to quantify how the impact that this has. So we want to know how much noise pollution there is and the impact that this has. And to do that, of course, we need to then record how loud it is. We have to try to see how loud is it when there are no ships, for example, and then see how much the ships increase that sound. And that's a type of research that we do here. On top of this, we also want to study the ecological monitoring. So we also want to gain ecological information, not only the pollution part. And this we have achieved by trying to listen to hours and hours of sounds, and also trying to use some advanced machine learning techniques to try to detect different sounds of interest, like, for example, fish sounds or invertebrate sounds. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of whales here, but we do have some dolphins and seals that also produce some very interesting sounds, and that we've shared with Elise. And I think that's a summary of the work that we do at FLIS with the acoustics team.
Thank you, Clea. I'm just going to share as well the next two slides. So this is the acoustic equipment, so hydrophones being deployed, if I'm correct, and then here being retrieved as well. So yeah, thanks
something
so much,
maybe
Clea.
to mention with this beautiful image of Elise is that when you deploy it and it stays there for several months, actually it attracts quite some fauna, which is of course going to have an influence on the sound that we record. It has its advantages and disadvantages, but it's always interesting to see how these structures become so populated with different animals and plants.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Clea. Okay, so moving on to the research workshops. I'll just introduce this a little bit and then I'll hand over to Marine. So to research the psychological impact of marine sounds, with Marine, we co-led 3 workshops in different contexts. So workshop 1 here happened at the Royal College of Arts in London. This is more of a pedagogical context with students from the contemporary art practice MA degree course. So just to give an overview of the workshop structure, participants were invited to complete a first questionnaire upon arrival. They would then listen to the sound piece and then afterwards complete a second questionnaire to measure the before and after effects. We'd then have an open discussion about the listening experience. And then in some workshops, we also had extra time for some drawing in response to how participants felt while listening. We then had an ocean literacy multiple choice listening quiz where people had to listen to 9 sounds and say which sound they thought they were listening out of 3 options. Marine and I then gave a presentation of the project to people, which also included explanations of the source of the sound recordings and some of the impact of noise pollution on marine life. At the end of the workshop, people were invited to look at a list of local initiatives to take part in pro-environmental action, as well with a follow-up questionnaire 3 weeks after the workshop. So this was workshop 1. The other workshops had similar structures. We gave another one here at the Flanders Marine Institute at FLIS during the Day of Science in Ostend. And then a third workshop, which was just led this week at La Chapelle Jeanne d'Arc Contemporary Art Center in the city of Thouars in France. So this third workshop was quite a different context as well, comparison to the first 2, because it took place in an exhibition context, as the soundscape is currently part of a solo exhibition I have on at the Art Center. So this iteration of Waves of Resonance is presented in the crypt of the chapel across 5 speakers and was specialized in situ for the crypt, along with very dim lighting. So it's a pretty immersive listening experience as well. Yeah, and I think also what's perhaps interesting to mention is that the project, so the sound piece Waves of Resonance, is intended to express itself through a series of iterations that will continue to evolve over time, meaning that every iteration of the project will improve, iteration of the sound piece, will provide new insights, creating a feedback loop of new research for the next iteration and subsequent exhibitions. So now I'll hand over to Marine, who will talk to us more about the methodology of the research in more detail. So on to you, Marine.
Yeah, thank you, Elise. Okay, so indeed, I will present more the research aspect. So we have several research questions. The first one was, to what extent does listening to this immersive sound piece affect the well-being and emotions of the participants? And yeah, you can go further, Elise. The second question was regarding how do people actually perceive these biological, anthropic, and geophonic sounds that Elise presented. Then, to what extent does the workshop also affect ocean literacy? And this was taken in its broad sense. So, in terms of how people feel connected to the ocean, what attitudes they have towards the ocean, and also ocean-friendly intentions and behaviors. Then the final research question was really looking at what level of knowledge do people also have regarding ocean sounds. So these research questions, to answer them, we used questionnaires and group discussions, as Elise mentioned. And
Sorry. There we go.
And then, yeah, more specific in the types of measures that we had. So there was the pre-survey and the post-survey. So the pre-survey was given right before listening to the sound piece, and their participants reported their sociodemographics, as well as their visit frequency to the coast and their overall level of nature connectedness. And so these variables were included as kind of control variables, as they might influence how people relate to the sound piece and the effects that the sound piece may have on them. Then we measured their ocean-friendly behaviors and their well-being, and this was specifically in terms of their stress level and their mood, and some emotions, so both basic and complex emotions, as well as filler items to distract their attention away from our research goals. Then in the post-survey, so the questionnaire given right after listening to the sound piece, we again measured their well-being and their emotions, and we included a specific scale about their experience of awe. We measured how connected they feel to the ocean, what attitudes they may have towards ocean sustainability, and their intentions of ocean-friendly behaviors, as well as some more filler items. And yeah. So this is an example of the list of environmental actions and initiatives that we shared to the participants at the very end of the workshop. So in terms of initiatives, we always included international and local-based initiatives. So this is the one that we used for the London workshop. But these initiatives were always tailored to each country or region where we did the workshop. So this was in the aim of doing a follow-up survey, which was given 3 weeks after the workshop. And here we asked participants specific actions that they may have done towards these shared initiatives. So, for example, if they looked them up online, if they donated to these initiatives, if they participated in any events organized by these initiatives. We also measured their frequency of these more general pro-environmental actions that we shared. And then we measured once again their ocean-friendly behaviors. So this is more an example of the questions that were sometimes asked during the group discussion that was done during the workshop. So here we wanted to look at whether there was a specific sound that affected them, if they could describe that sound and explain how it affected them. Were there sounds that they could not distinguish being either anthropic, geophonic, or biological? Were there any particular sounds where they could identify the source? How did they feel about these anthropic sounds? And more in general, what they thought of noise pollution and how it affects the ocean. So here we show, as Elise mentioned, the during the workshop, we also included a moment where they would listen to 9 specific sounds, and they had to determine what that sound was. So here are the options that we gave them, and written in bold is the correct answer. So for our hypothesis, so for the first research question, we base this on the comparison between the pre and the post survey, and we expect that listening to the sound piece would increase well-being, their experience of awe, and their ocean connectedness. For the second research question, to determine how people perceive these sounds, we would do a small qualitative analysis based on the group discussion. For the third research question, we base this between the pre, post, and follow-up survey. And so here we expect that participating in the workshop will increase ocean-friendly behaviors, and that ocean-friendly attitudes and intentions would predict this positive change in behaviors. And then the final research question to determine what knowledge people have of ocean sounds, we will base this on the answers they gave to the multiple choice questionnaire. Yeah, so I have some preliminary results. So they don't include the workshop that we did in France because, yeah, it was earlier this week, so we didn't have time yet to look at the data. So here is the results from the workshop in London and in Ostend. In total, we had 50 participants, so 18 in London and 32 in Ostend. There was a slight majority of females and a slight majority of Belgium, so that was mostly from the workshop in Ostend. In the London workshop, there was more a diversity of nationalities, so 16% Chinese and 8% British. In terms of age groups, we have a good representation of the younger age group, so from 17 to 35 years old, and that was mostly based in the London workshop. And then an older age group that was from 50 to 83 years old was mostly based the Ostend workshop, and then a smaller representation of the age group from 36 to 50 years old. And in terms of education level, we see a good majority of participants that graduated from higher education and only 20% who graduated from secondary school. So if we look at the results in terms of well-being, what we see is actually there are significant differences for each well-being outcome. From the pre-test to the post-test. So we see that the level of stress significantly reduces, as well as positive mood and negative mood. But then we also see an increase in low arousal positive mood. So here I will explain the difference between the positive mood and the low arousal positive mood. So positive mood that referred more to high arousal affect, such as feeling excited, enthusiastic, inspired, or alert. And the low arousal positive mood referred more to feeling relaxed, content, peaceful, and calm. So it's interesting to see these results, and so we can really determine that in general, listening to the sound piece led to more calm and less stress. But these results will likely evolve as we collect more data, because now they're based also on non-parametric statistical tests due to the rather small sample size. Here we can see the specific results regarding awe experience and ocean connectedness. So this was only measured after the sound piece, so we cannot really make a comparison. But we can see that in general, participants report a moderately high level of awe experience and an even higher level of ocean connectedness. So that's also interesting to see. Yeah, and then in terms of the ocean-friendly behaviors, we had 17 participants who did both the pre-test and the follow-up. So here we don't see a significant difference, but yeah, again, this is also rather a small sample size. So these results don't yet take into account differences in terms of the workshop, their sociodemographics, the level of nature connectedness in general, and how frequent people visit the coast. Finally, results regarding ocean literacy. So we see that the mean percentage of correct answers was 35% for the workshop in London and 60% for the workshop in Ostend, which was a significant difference between the two groups, which is also quite interesting to see a difference in the knowledge regarding ocean sounds. And the sound with the least correct answer was a seal moan, and this was mostly confused with a vessel impact on sea ice. And the sound with the most correct answer was vessel. So we see that the more biological sounds were more difficult to distinguish, to evaluate than the more anthropic sounds. Yeah, and I think that was a global overview of the research aspects.
Thank you, Marine. Thanks a lot for that. So just to conclude and give everyone a bit of an outline of future project developments. So as I said, to start with, the exhibition at La Chapelle Jeanne d'Arc in Art Center in the city of Thouars in France is on until the 21st of September. And then in October, there will be another exhibition, which will include Waves of Resonance in it in London at a space which is called 5 Years Archway. So also with Marine, we are keen to continue the research through workshops, including the idea of leading workshops in more of a clinical setting to see if we can perhaps develop more practical tools out of this and further research the therapeutic potential of marine sounds. And then on another output, which will be done by Marine, is the writing of a scientific paper. In development to this project, I am also working on a new film, which focuses on the relationship between our bodies and the ocean through sound from both submerged and embodied perspectives. So this project will investigate the sonic impact of climate change and the therapeutic potential of particular frequencies, weaving both together scientific insight and transcendent experiences shaped by both personal and collective introspections. So it's a very North Sea focused project. Yeah. And then just to finish off, I'd like to thank you all for listening. And also say that before we go into the questions, if anyone would like to listen to the sound piece, they are welcome to email me and I will provide a link to listen. Likewise, if you'd like to be kept posted about upcoming projects. And of course, on behalf of us three, I'd like to thank the European Marine Board, Britt and Sheila, for their precious support throughout this project, alongside our other partners. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elise. That was great. And Clea and Marine, maybe, yeah, perfect. Oops, I thought my video was on, but it's not. Hello, there we go. I'm there. So thank you very much. That was very good. I will say that I actually was part of the group of people that was part of the study group, so to speak, here in Ostend, and it was really an interesting experience. I really enjoyed it. So if you're around France, I don't actually know where this place is, Elise, that you mentioned where your exhibition is. I couldn't even write it, and it wasn't written on your slide. So maybe you want to just tell people where it is. If they're close by, they can go and experience it.
Yeah, for sure. It's in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region. It's not very far from Nantes and not too far from La Rochelle driving as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
very
Mhm.
good. And you said in London it was going to be somewhere else?
It will be in a space called 5 Years, Archway. So it'll be up north in Archway as well.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right, very good. Thank you very much. So a reminder for people, if you have any questions for our three speakers, please put them in the Q&A. I see there's one question there, but I have some questions from myself, and from my team actually here at the Marine Board also for you. I'll start with the easy one that is by Fernanda Martin Belasaso. How long does the underwater audio listening session, how long have the underwater audio listening sessions been? So I think she means how long is the clip is 16 minutes, right? If I'm right.
Yeah, it's 16 minutes. And during the workshops, as the sound piece was being worked on in progress throughout the workshops we gave, it varied between a 10 and 16 minutes listening period.
Okay, yeah. And the whole workshop, if I'm not mistaken, was about an hour, just over that, I think.
So the London workshop was an hour and a half, if I remember correctly, Marine. And then the workshops we gave at Vliz were shortened because we actually gave 3 shorter workshops during the Day of Science. So these were reduced to 50 minutes, if I remember correctly. And then the workshop we gave this week was also an hour and a half.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And maybe I'll just go with my next question, which was actually, or maybe an observation really. Maureen, your differences in the ocean literateness of participants, if that's a word, I think is, I mean, I'm not really that surprised if the first one in London was held at an art school and the second one was held at an ocean at an ocean research center. Yes, it was the day for the public, but the people who would make the effort to come out, and it was a beautiful day, so it was a really nice day to come out, would already be people who I think are thinking about the ocean. So yeah, you probably need to bring that into your discussion when you write the
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And that's why it's important to take into account these baseline variables, such as how often do people visit the coast and how, what is their feeling of connectedness to nature, because I'm sure that that already also explains some variability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be really interesting to compare the London with the France, if they're both sort of more arty scenes.
Yeah, yeah. And also further inland
Yeah,
because yeah, and Ostend was at the coast, but
yeah,
then France and London more inland, so
yeah.
that also has an effect. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, I see we also have a question from John Fajardo, who says he's from the Philippines. Welcome. It's really nice to have somebody from that far away. I love the concept of the study, but like you said earlier about the further upcoming projects regarding this, will there be a chance on gaining a study group online? Because it seems like an interesting experience and he wants to participate. And how did you measure ocean friendliness? So maybe Marine, you can talk about the ocean friendliness and then yeah.
Yeah. So it was, I imagine that he refers to the ocean-friendly behaviors,
Mhm.
attitudes, and intentions. So these 3 measures are all part of something called the Blue Survey. So it's a validated survey that yeah, has been created by several researchers, and there's a paper online if you would like to know more about it. So it's really to measure these different aspects of ocean literacy. So more specific, ocean-friendly behaviors is, for example, avoiding products that are toxic to the marine environment, taking short showers. So we asked them how frequently people engage in these behaviors. Then, regarding their attitudes, it was more about whether they think ocean sustainability is important and whether, to what extent, the ocean should be used as a resource for human utilization. So it's questions such as these that have been previously constructed in another survey.
Yeah. And then, Elise, I don't know if you guys have thought about doing something like this online. You would get a much bigger response, I guess, if you did it that way. I don't know if that's something you've considered.
Yeah, I think it could be a greater opportunity, but then I don't know about the measuring conditions. Maybe that's for Marine to answer. I don't know how you feel about that option, Marine. Yeah.
I think it would be possible. Then they would fill in the questionnaire online. Yeah. But it would be a very different listening experience, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. And then I do see that there was some questions in the chat, which I haven't read yet, from Geraint Whitaker. Thank you for the presentation. To what extent were you considering the difference in listening environment and how those might have impacted the experience of listening? For example, I imagine the listening experience in the class would be very different to the crypt.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm taking a perspective of looking at differences between the groups, so between the different workshops, and then differences within the group, so before and after listening the sound piece. So with the workshop from France, there will be extra data added to it, and hopefully I can see some differences between the workshops, but that's definitely something that I will take into account, that each workshop was unique in its own way, although we really tried to follow the same structure as well, so the same questionnaire and the same outline in that case. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Are there? Let me just check. I don't see any more open questions. So maybe I will then go to some of the questions that we had internally here. Britt was asking for you, Elise, how has this collaboration with the Artist in Residence program with you and Clea and Marine influenced your art and the artistic practice and how you would be doing it in the future? Do you feel like it actually has an impact on how you did your work?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. Yeah, like I said earlier, I think we really want to continue the research of this project. And it's also going to develop into a film project too. So yeah, on a personal, it's been really great too, because yeah, it's great collaboration. But also professionally, it's pushed me to think differently about my art practice and ways of making too, and how not just thinking about art making as a excluded practice from other practices, but really thinking through collaboration and cross-disciplinary collaboration as well. Yeah, so for sure.
Yeah. And then maybe I'll turn the question around and ask the same to Clea and Marine. I mean, I guess you guys are the three of you come from three such different fields. So similarly for you, Clea, how has it actually been working with the psychologist and an artist when all you want to do is listen to the sound of whales, for instance, or dolphins? Has it influenced the way you think about the science?
Well, it's something that I've seen not only in this artistic collaboration, but also in other ones that I think actually there's a lot of interest to use this underwater sound, to actually convey to the public what's underwater. I think it's a very straightforward way to communicate what's happening underwater and how unknown is it to us. And I think this collaboration makes me be aware of it even more. Of course, at some point for you, it becomes very normal to just listen to these sounds, but it's very interesting to see how you look at them differently afterwards when you think the impact that this can have to other people when they first, for example, just learn that the invertebrates also make sound.
Yeah.
Things like this, and then they might, the next time they see a shrimp, they might think differently about it. And this is something that I think is very powerful, and I have enjoyed a lot on this journey.
Yeah. And for you, Marine?
Yeah, it was definitely a really worthwhile experience working with Elise, and I especially enjoyed being able to connect to participants not only from Belgium, but also be able to go to the UK and to France. And I think in terms of bringing the art perspective, yeah, from the beginning, I've always seen how Elise artwork really inspires emotion in people, and I think that's really interesting to see, and it kind of like reinforces what I'm aiming to measure as well. And I think that was particularly present in France, as the crypt was a really immersive experience, and I think that it was nice to see how this emotion that she creates also led people to really think about what her message was as well, what she's trying to convey through her artwork, which I think sometimes maybe as scientists we have difficulty in doing, in really making our message accessible and really making people think about our message. So I think in that way it's really nice to approach the public in this, yeah, in this way, in this more accessible and, yeah, building more deeper connection, I would say, in that way.
Yeah. I see there was a question about how they can access the sound clip, but I think it's probably been answered by somebody in the background. I think if they email you, Elise, right, that would be the best way. Is that how it works? Maybe you can put your email address in the chat so that people can see it.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to email me here. Oh, I see Britt just put it in. So yeah, thank you for that, Britt.
And then there's another question again by John asking, will you collaborate with other organizations that could use these audios to help in conservation, like some studies use the sound of reefs to help with reef rebuilding? I'm not sure if there's anything in the sound recordings that you have here which might be able to be used in other ways. So I don't know if anybody is thinking of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard of these sort of research and projects, which I think are really, really great and inspiring. In regards to our project, I personally don't have the knowledge on whether these sounds would help coral reefs grow again, so I can't really answer that. So I'm sorry, but I would love to find out more.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine not, because they're not measured at a coral reef, so no.
Yeah, I can jump into that. Definitely not for coral reefs, and I would say definitely not for any ecosystem, because the sound piece tells more of a story instead of really emulating the sound that you can hear at a certain place, which I think is very interesting for the psychological effects. So the Marines research, and I think also it creates a lot more emotions and it conveys a message a lot more in a lot more interesting way. But indeed, it doesn't represent the sound of one specific ecosystem. And it also includes actually some disturbance on it, which of course it's very interesting to see how people react to that, but that also would not help, of course, if you would be an animal trying to settle somewhere and suddenly every 15 minutes a boat is passing by and a pile driving is also passing by. That would definitely not help. But I think it could be interesting. I don't know if the question was to use the sounds directly on the restoration efforts or to use them on the conservation program to make it maybe raise awareness. And I think then that would be interesting. For example, if you make a new nature reserve, that there would be like an installation somewhere outside at the beach where you could actually listen to this piece, and then that would make maybe people do less harm if they can on that specific area, for example. I think that would be interesting, but I don't know if there are currently any initiatives doing that.
Yeah. I will also say that, I mean, I know that there's been some work up in Scotland where I used to be, where they were just recording the soundscape, in very, very physically active places. So where there's lots of water sloshing about, because they were looking at whether they could put sounds in the water to scare off, say, seals or something from aquaculture farms, or from, underwater turbines or something, so that what the general soundscape is before you try to use another sound. Because if it's super loud, then whatever sound you make has to be louder, that type of thing. So I think there's quite a bit of work that's being done in this field of knowing what the sounds are naturally, and then how much what the impact of extra sound is on top of that. So there's quite a bit of work done. The other thing I was wondering about is whether, so for instance, this sound with a boat coming by every 15 minutes, I could imagine that experiments in a lab of, say, larval growth, you could actually test what species would be more resilient to human impacts by testing it in a lab situation. So there's other types of science that you could probably do to look at this, to use sound in this way. Maybe not this specific sound piece, but possibly some bits of it might actually.
Yeah, we've used some of the sound that are present in Elise's piece for that specific reason, to see how oyster larvae settle in different sound conditions. And you do see a difference if they are hearing a healthy, natural environment, they settle a lot faster than if they're hearing only boats, for example, or silence. So that's interesting to know.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Then we have a question by Fernando Martin Velacosa from Mexico saying, how can you describe at an emotional level your experience recording in the field? So how did it impact you emotionally? I guess it's a question for you mostly, Elise, but maybe also for Clea and Marine.
So I'm taking this as a personal level experience. Well, I mean, it's quite something to witness the sound of melting glaciers in real life. So it certainly impacted me for sure. And feeling these kinds of emotions is definitely a driver for this project, and to continue this and to convey these sounds, and also to translate these emotions that I felt in the field from an intimate perspective through the work as well. So that's more for field recording. But then also, I remember the first time Clea shared the sound of pile driving noise to me, and I just found it incredible, like so violent. And so that was also very impacting. But then also feeling absolutely mesmerized hearing the sound of a fish for the first time. So yeah, I'd say personal aspects and these first listening experiences definitely try to be translated emotionally through the work. I hope that answers it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you, Marine or Clea, want to add something to that.
I haven't had experience recording in the field. I recall the first time I heard the sound piece, and I know that what happened is that I heard sounds that felt familiar to me, but oddly enough, I have never paid attention to. So, for example, diving into water is a very recognizable sound, but that you never pay attention to. And at some point in the sound piece, you hear the sound of going underwater, and it's really, for me, I associate it with good memories. So then it gives also, a very pleasurable experience to have.
Yeah, from my side, it's not like Elise that I record directly and I listen to what I'm recording, so I see it always several months after. But yeah, I discovered you had something called underwater sound and you could study it, and I've decided that to become my professional life. So that says everything, I think. I just find it fascinating, and of course, you always have this. In my case, because you retrieve the instruments a lot later, you always have this moment of panic. hoping that it's going to be there, and then the moment of happiness, the moment that you can actually start listening to the recorded sounds. So it's always a very nice roller coaster.
Yeah. And then Geraint Whittaker asks, often in art science collaboration, there's a balance between the artist's creative freedom and then representing the science in its truest form. Were there any tensions between what was produced and what you wanted to be represented at a scientific level? And if that was the case, how did you deal with that? How did you negotiate this? It's a very personal question.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if Lise, if you mind I start.
Go for it, and I can complete after if necessary.
I think there has never been any tension in that regard. I think we're both coming from a perspective of wanting to understand how each discipline works and wanting to really make the best out of that. So I think the fact that the communication was always very open, it was regular, and we were really coming from a place of, yeah, we are collaborating together on this, then that helps. I think there was, of course, from a true scientist perspective, I would have wanted, for example, the sound piece to remain exactly the same for each workshop, for example, but I really understood why it was important for the project that the sound piece evolved because, as Elise said, it was evolving from the feedback of the participants of the previous workshop. So, in that sense, it was really creating a sound piece that had the most optimal listening experience. So, for my research, that was also good to incorporate. And so, yeah, I think we were definitely able to negotiate in that sense. I don't know what you think it is.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Thank you. Yeah, I think we've been we're working very well together. There's really great communication. And then I think maybe something to add about the evolution of the soundscape through the research workshops and exhibitions. I've made sure to keep the different versions of the soundscape that were presented on each occasion and a description. And that's also information that Maureen will be able to include in her paper as well to stay transparent about that too. But yeah.
Definitely.
And regarding to the sound, I said it already, but Elise was focused on telling a story. So there is no wrong or right from the scientific point of view regarding acoustics. Of course, she has Arctic sounds, Belgian sounds, and sounds from other places. You will never find them in one place, but that's not the story she's trying to tell. So for me, we also never had um, any issue with that. It's the creativity, freedom, and we did have feedback for each other regarding which sounds were what, which sounds would maybe explain certain situations, but that was not a tension, just like a collaboration.
And maybe I see there's still one more question, but maybe I will just say this work that you guys have done is really transdisciplinary, right? It's really, and one of the things that I think we've found in most cases, if you want to do this, it takes a lot more time than, so, if you were just going to do if you were just going to do the psychological bit, or you were just going to do the hydrophone bit, or you're just going to do the art bit, you probably could have done this quicker. Right. But it always takes time to kind of have this communication and this sort of discussions where you all have to understand each other's point of view. So I guess, I mean, I wonder how much time do you think that took? How much more extra time do you think, if you were just going to do a piece of work without the other bits, is this 20% more time, do you think? Is it 50% more time? Or do you think it would have taken the same amount of time?
Maybe I can start with this. I mean, I think, yeah, there's definitely much more work involved for sure. But then from my perspective, I wouldn't want to do it any other way. And like just to add from the previous question as well, in regards to Clea and being able to go aboard the ship with her and the rest of the Blizz acoustic team, like for me, from an artist perspective, it just completely opened my eyes as well as what recording is at sea from a scientific perspective as well. And I've learned a tremendous amount from both Clea and Marine. And I think the curiosity that brought us together and our passion for the ocean is also about learning and then, thinking through together and then seeing where this project can go. So for sure, it takes more time, but it also makes it so much better. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Don't have anything to add to that.
So you guys are not going to tell me how much longer it take you to work. I mean, it's a question to think about, because I think there's quite a lot of multidisciplinary projects out there, and I think funders of these projects need to be aware that there needs to be some time to get the thing going, because we don't speak the same language. So it's not a flippant question, it's quite an important question, and I think you probably need to think about that so that in future.
The thing is that if you would not do it like that, you would not reach the same. So it's very complicated to say how much longer would it be, because you would just not get there. So it's infinite longer. That's a bit the thing. Of course, if only composing a sound piece, Elise could probably estimate how long would that take, but that's not exactly her project. So then it's a bit complicated to say in percentage how long would that be? It would be a different result, and then you would compare different
Apples
results.
and oranges,
I mean, it could have been just like Clea sent me a bunch of sound recordings, and then I went off and did something, and then Marine on hers and constructed some questions and did the workshops just on her own with a speaker. But we decided to really take time and talk to each other to really discuss the best ways, the best steps of developing this together, and also keeping each other posted of developments and continuously checking in as well about how things will develop further. So yeah, I suppose it's also communication, but then like Clea said, it's hard to measure otherwise.
All right, I think we have one last question and then we probably need to wrap up. From Stefan de Vries. It's a very difficult question. How did you process, interpret, translate, transform the inaudible sounds into into something that's relatable to a human experience, or simply a bandpass filter to the human hearing range, and why?
I can answer that one if
this was a very technical question.
So there are two different things here. One, if Elise did some recordings with geophones, and that does bring some sounds that are usually inaudible because they are vibrations. So we would just hear them by touching, but we would not hear them with our ears. And that's the way of translating inaudible sounds to audible sounds. So you translate these vibrations into sound, and that's what Elise has incorporated. But for the sounds themselves, we have not bandpassed them, or like everything from the sound piece is within the human hearing range, and we have not, I think, correct me Elise if I'm mistaken, but we have not changed the pitch of any inaudible sound to be able to be heard by humans. So actually there is no sounds that, except these ones that were recorded using geophones, that actually a human would not hear if you would be on the water.
Okay, that's a very clear answer to a very confusing question. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think I have one more slide that I need to show. If I can remember how to do that. And are you seeing the slide with your faces on it? Yes? Yes, I'm never quite sure. Okay, so I think the last thing for me to do is to thank you all for coming, for listening, actually thanks for the speakers. It was super interesting. And to let you know that our next webinar will take place in a month's time on the 17th of July. and it will be by our previous young ambassador, Juliette Baguette, who will be talking about marine protected areas in the European Union. So it'll be something completely different, but actually surprisingly related. So thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for the three of you for really a fascinating project and for a very interesting discussion. So thanks.
Thank you, Sheila. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.